The last Watchtower of the year 2025 has just been released, and in this we are going to see some interesting tactics that the Jehovah's Witness leadership uses in order to exercise thought control over their people. Yeah, it's as scary as it sounds, but in my opinion is a very real thing. They do control how people think. We're going to explore an interesting little a little stick of gum that the Watchtower leaders kind of threw in there for some esoterically minded people to kind of chew on and maybe convince themselves that the end is right around the corner in 2034. It's a little bit interesting how Watchtower, they've had a long history of getting end times predictions wrong, and so they've definitely backed away from saying anything directly.
Some thought that Armageddon was going to come 40 years from 1914. We were doing a lot of counting back then.
But if there are Jehovah's Witnesses who are more old school, they might always be looking for clues and trying to put the puzzle together. You know, they're just kind of sitting there like, the moon is high and the end is nigh, and we don't wonder why. So if you're going to blow the governing body, don't get some in your eye. Oh my God. That was probably the worst facsimile of an Irish pub song that anyone has ever said, but...
They ask you how you are, you just have to say that you're fine when you're not really fine, but you just can't get into it because they would never understand.
I'm too lazy to cut this out. We're doing this in one take, so it is what it is. I'm sorry. We're moving right along. Next, the other thing that we'll talk about in this article, or not in this article, in this magazine, is how they seem to not be able to get their doctrine straight, because just a few weeks ago, Stephen Lett had said that, no, we don't look for the origins of things, that's just a bunch of hootenanny. Well, in this Watchtower, they remind Jehovah's Witnesses that they need to think about the spiritistic origins of certain practices. So a lot to cover in this one, so let's do this. Hello and welcome back to the JW Thoughts channel. My name is Wally, and today we're looking at a Watchtower. Yes, I pretty much do this every month now. It's something that I didn't do when I first started the channel, but you guys all seem to really enjoy me covering what goes on in the latest Watchtower. So if it's something that you guys enjoy, I'm going to keep doing it. So quickly before we get into it, don't forget to drop a like on the video. It literally takes a half a second, maybe even less, a quarter of a second, a microsecond, a nano click. Shoutouts to Transformers Beast Wars. If you know, you know. And drop a like. Anyway, that's a long way of saying that we're going to start the video now. So this is the December 2025 Watchtower, where this son is very confused. He's pointing at the floor and saying, "Dad, why are our walls the same damn color as our flooring?" And honestly, he's right. What are these people doing with their design? Have some inspiration. Do better, people.
Oh, that house looks just awful. It's awful, awful.
And the first article is going to be talking about the Book of Job can help you when you suffer. I think most people are familiar, if you're on this channel, with the biblical narrative surrounding Job, so we don't need to get completely lost in the weeds on how the Jehovah's Witnesses completely misunderstand what's going on in that book, but we'll just take them at their word for how things go. Now, we're just going to jump forward here, just due to sheer boredom, into paragraph 10, where we have this little section. In reality, though, he admitted that his efforts to defend his integrity sometimes amounted to wild talk. In chapter 31, we read that Job spoke of wanting to be exonerated by God. Of course, Job was wrong to demand a direct answer from God as to what was behind his suffering. In retrospect, we can see that Job's desperate plea reflected his unswerving devotion to Jehovah and unshakable hope that somehow God would recognize his integrity. When Jehovah did finally answer Job from a windstorm, he did not go into detail about the reasons for Job's suffering. Neither did he condemn Job for his complaints or mention his protests of innocence. Rather, Jehovah instructed Job as a father would a son. And that was the right approach. As a result, Job humbly acknowledged how little he really knew, and he repented of his rash words. So just for a tiny bit of context here, Job, he loses everything in his life. He has 10 of his children die. His wife leaves him. You know, he loses all of his money. His body is covered in these scars, and he has all of these illnesses. Everything just goes completely cattywampus in his life. And it's all because God and Satan are having a discussion, and Satan's like, I bet that people won't be faithful to you if they're afflicted with bad stuff. And God says, here, how about this poor sod? Why don't you go and ruin his life and see what he says? And so that's the background information here. But what I find interesting is that how they talk about having a realistic complaint. A very real complaint in this situation would be, why do I have to be the sufferer of all of these evils because of the insecurity of God? So God feels insecure that someone's nagging him. So some little annoying troll comes up to God and is like, neener, neener, neener. And God says, okay, fine, go and kill this guy's kids. Make his wife leave him, get rid of everything he has. That way I can prove my own insecurity to myself. And Job's sitting there like, man, this kind of sucks. I'm not going to lie. Like, I'm not like saying I'm not going to worship you, but this like super sucks. And from that, Watchtower's take on it is, in reality, though, he admitted his efforts to defend his integrity sometimes amounted to wild talk. And then, of course, Job was wrong to demand a direct answer from God as to what was behind his suffering. Now, what I really gather from this is that the Jehovah's Witness leadership wants witnesses to have this same mindset. You don't need to understand why you're suffering. You don't need a direct answer from Jehovah, from the governing body, as to why certain changes are made, why certain things we've said seem to be inconsistent with the things we're saying now. You don't need a direct answer. And honestly, it's not your right. You don't have a right to even ask the question. So we simply need to recontextualize how you think about honest, genuine questions and reshape that into loyalty. It's all about loyalty. You know, that honest question you were asking is wild talk. Must be apostates. You might be having some sort of mental illness. That's wild talk. Don't worry about it. Here's what you need to know. And I think they're trying to form this story of Job and what happened there. And this whole dialogue between him and Satan, and then Job and his so-called comforters, which we'll get into here in a second. They're trying to reshape this as a stop complaining, don't worry, you don't need answers. What you need is us. However, the book of Job teaches us that we can express our innermost feelings to Jehovah, confident that he will hear us. He will not condemn us if our heartfelt supplications occasionally veer into the realm of wild talk, as occurred with Job. Rather, God will give us the strength and the wisdom we need to endure. He may also correct us to the extent needed, as he did Job. The book of Job also teaches us how to endure if we receive counsel or discipline from Jehovah's word, which doesn't mean anything because an individual can't interpret Jehovah's word. It's only the governing body. So, or discipline from the governing body, his organizations, or mature friends, which mature friends again means from the chain of command. So if there are different ways that the governing body chooses to punish you by their interpretation of the Bible directly from his organization or from a smaller part of his organization, but unincorporated, the elders, you need to just accept that. And why? Just as Job benefited from humbly accepting the correction he received, we benefit when we allow ourselves to be readjusted. So this is what I said about thought control. You need to readjust your thinking. Your thinking has a wedgie, and you need to lift one of them cheeks and get yourself all situated there. You need that mental readjustment. When you look at it, though, like what was happening in the story of Job, like there's some really bad things happening to him. He has legitimate concerns, and he doesn't understand why. And just trying to gain understanding of why something is happening, especially if you know that someone knows. Kind of like if you were a Jehovah's Witness and you're trying to get an understanding of the direction of the organization, what's going on, you know that they know, and yet you can't get a straight answer. It's just, you got to have faith. So it's really emphasizing this idea that You need to work on your thoughts. It's about you. Don't worry about these, extemporaneous things. Extemporaneous, I don't think that was the right word. Doesn't matter. These outside forces, just focus on what you can control. And what you can control is your thoughts. But the thing is you're not actually controlling your thoughts, because every so often, if you have a mental wedgie, we're going to be here to readjust you. And before we move on from Job, in the next article, it is talking about how the example of Job can help us to give good counsel, which obviously is talking to Jehovah's Witnesses in general, but primarily elders. And I think it's really funny because the example that they give of bad counsel or bad comforters or whatever the case is actually exactly what the elders do. This is a little interesting. So here we go in paragraph 4. The Bible says that Job's 3 companions went to sympathize with Job and comfort him after hearing about his calamities. However, they failed to achieve that objective. Why? For at least 3 reasons. First, they were quick to jump to wrong conclusions. For example, they mistakenly assumed that Job was being punished for sins that he had committed. Second, much of the counsel those men gave Job was unhelpful, unkind, and downright hurtful. For instance, all 3 men made statements that sounded good but were lacking real substance. Twice, Bildad unkindly told Job that he talked too much, and Zophar cuttingly implied that Job was empty-headed. Third, although they may have raised their voices when speaking, not have raised their voices when speaking to Job, their tone was often condescending, sarcastic, and accusatory. Ultimately, these men became more interested in proving Job wrong than in hearing his heart or upbuilding his faith. So let's break this down. So they failed to achieve their objective for 3 reasons. The first is they were quick to jump to a conclusion, and it was wrong. So the first thing, if you've ever been a Jehovah's Witness and you had the misfortune of talking to an elder, a group of elders, I'm pretty sure it's like 90-something% of people could confirm this. The first conclusion that they will draw is, where did you hear this? Is this from an apostate? Where are you getting this information from? Which, in my case, it wasn't from any apostate sources. They were things that I had thought about when reading the Bible and reading Watchtower publications. So to hear that, spat back at me like, oh, that sounds like apostate stuff. What is this apostasy that you're getting involved in? I was like, no, these are just honest questions I'm having. So most elders, I think, will fall into this category where someone can ask or have a reasonable doubt, a good question about a legitimate inconsistency that Watchtower has, and they will get elders accusing them. Where did you get this from? Drawing the wrong conclusion immediately. Or if it's something of a sinful nature and someone's just expressing a desire to no longer be a Jehovah's Witness, the wrong conclusion that people will come to is, so you just want to sin, huh? Sounds like you just want to go out there and be part of the world and drink and gamble your life away. Well, have fun doing drugs, you whore. Again, arriving at the wrong conclusion, because someone might just want to be in a healthy, committed relationship with someone they met that's not a Jehovah's Witness, and they want to go hiking and brew their own beer. I don't know why I described someone from Portland, but that's what you got from me. They will immediately jump to a conclusion, and more often than not, it's a wrong conclusion. And then the second bit of counsel that they gave, it was unhelpful, unkind, and downright hurtful. So the next thing that something else that elders will do, I guess we don't have to keep it in a linear fashion here, is they will have this terrible advice where they tell you, well, why don't you write a letter to the branch? Anyone that's written a letter to the branch about a question that they have that's something that doesn't have a good answer is going to basically get you targeted. If you write a letter to the branch will write a letter to the elders saying, hey, watch out for this guy. He is trouble. You need to monitor him because he might be spreading apostate ideas. So it's going to be essentially unhelpful because they're not going to have an answer for you. There's not if you want to say, okay, well, what is this whole business about when was Jerusalem destroyed? Was it 607? Was it 587? Here's all the evidence. An elder is not going to give you anything helpful. At the very best, he's going to make fun of you for not understanding Watchtower's position. He'll just be like, well, why don't you get it? Why don't you get it? It's so clear. It's so obvious. And when you show him with evidence that it's not, it's completely unhelpful and downright hurtful sometimes. And then the last one, although they may not have raised their voices when speaking, their tone was often condescending, sarcastic, and accusatory. That sums up every single encounter disagreement I've had with elders. They are sarcastic, trying to make little quips and jokes. They're so condescending. I mean, supercilious is the perfect word for them. What does that mean? Like, by the height of their nose, they just talk at you like this, like, oh, I can't understand this. It's obnoxious how confidently wrong Jehovah's Witness elders are. It's like a spectacular disaster. And I know a lot of people, they don't like talking to elders. If you get the chance to, I low-key think it's almost kind of worth it, because if you're in the right mind space for it, that's a big qualifier here, but if you're like mentally able to like handle it, it is a fascinating experience, because you get to like shift things in your mind where you say, I used to look up to these people and now I see that they're kind of morons. So I guess we just have to take that L and move on with the rest of our lives. But it does continue here to where everything kind of like comes together, at least I think. Not surprisingly, the counsel Job's companions gave did not yield good results. Job felt crushed by their words. You can appreciate why he also felt the need to defend his reputation. That led him to become unbalanced in his thinking and to speak unwisely. So you get this bad advice. You get someone that is sarcastic and condescending, unhelpful and accusatory, and you want to just defend yourself with reason and evidence. And this is seen as what? To become unbalanced in his thinking and to speak unwisely. Job's companions did not share thoughts that harmonized with Jehovah's standards, nor did they treat Job with compassion. As a result, they unwittingly became tools in Satan's hands. So Job was wrong for wanting to defend himself, which is just an absurd proposition. Wanting to defend yourself against someone that's a moron and they're trying to give you their moronic ideas and tell you that you need to accept their moronic ideas. Like, wanting to defend yourself against that, I don't know how you could be in the wrong there. But again, if we're drawing this like sort of correlation between elders and Job's companions here, they said that they unwittingly became tools of Satan. That's kind of what elders do. Like, you go to them for spiritual help and comfort, and I think a lot of times they're the reason people get pushed away. They're the reason people finally get the confidence to leave, because like, okay, these guys don't know what they're talking about. They don't even know what their own belief systems are. I'm good. So I think low-key, Jehovah's Witness elders are turning themselves into tools of Satan. But that wraps up sort of how this is paradigm, this world of the Jehovah's Witness thought control does, because it all boils down to acceptance. You have to accept what the leaders say. You have to accept what the elders say. And if not, you are engaging in wild talk. You are crazy. You shouldn't be defending yourself or thinking too much. You just need to be loyal. And that is the real message at the end of the day. But now let's move right along to another interesting point. This one has to do with 2034. I've heard this float around quite a bit on the old Jehovah's Witness version of Reddit. Just people bringing up like this idea, and it essentially stems from, I won't try and get like super lost in the weeds with Bible stuff, but the number 120. There are a lot of significance, there is a lot of significance tied to that number 120. So God set like a cap, a cap on the human lifespan of being 120 years. After Saul was made the first king of Israel, sorry, I'm like reaching into the old memory banks here. It was 120 years later that they branched off into being two kingdoms of Judah and Israel, all that stuff. when the Queen of Sheba gave Solomon some talents of gold for the temple. It was 120 when they were doing their whole temple celebration with Solomon. There was 120,000 sheep and goats that were slaughtered as an offering to God. In the upper room at Pentecost in 33 CE, there were 120 people, and on and on and on and on. So a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses in recent times have caught on to this idea. Like I said earlier, some of the more esoteric witnesses are like, hey, I wonder if 120 years after the year 1914, that's maybe going to be when the end is going to come about. And I don't think that the leaders or the writers of Watchtower are unfamiliar that these little whispers are going on in the background. And so a responsible person that's learned their lesson from history would be, hey, guys, I know, like, when we're talking about that, just don't put anything about 120 years. We don't even want to throw that idea out there just because some people might take it the wrong way. Or if we do, you need a qualifier, a little footnote, something in there saying, hey, we don't know, don't use this as a way to speculate when the end is going to come. Just like nip it in the bud, essentially. Does Watchtower do that? Absolutely not. They like to keep it in there because why not make people slightly excited and paranoid? Jehovah is patient. You have probably noted that proud people do not like to be kept waiting. Pride makes them impatient. All right. What a contrast that is to Jehovah, who is the very epitome of patience. For instance, in the days of Noah, Jehovah stated that he would wait 120 years before destroying the wicked. Noah had time to raise his children and build the ark with the help of his family. Later, Jehovah's angelic representative listened patiently as Abraham requested him about the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. A proud person might have responded, "How dare you question me?" But in imitation of Jehovah, that angel was patient with Abraham. So what they're saying here is they're trying to use this as a demonstration of Jehovah's patience, but it's a little bit absurd. God was patient and he waited 120 years. We're talking about a timeless being, infinity. Like, it's, you can't even grasp how insignificant 120 years would be to a timeless being. Like one speck of dust on the entire planet Earth. Like just one little speck of dust hiding out somewhere in Bangladesh. Like that, it's just, you never think about a speck of dust in Bangladesh unless I say it, now you are. But that's how just completely insignificant it is. So it's weird that they put that in there from that perspective, because it doesn't really show Jehovah's patience necessarily. I don't think it's like the strongest example you can point to, and especially because they're using, the specific of the 120 years. Like, God was patient, blah, blah, blah. He had to preach. But the whole thing as it goes on, we won't, talk about it, or this video is going to be way too long, is something I talked about in my last video. Like, what are we doing by saying that God is patient and why he hasn't brought the end about now? Because the idea that millions of Jehovah's Witnesses are going to be joining just isn't consistent with the observation that regular Jehovah's Witnesses can open up their little peepers, look around them as they're selling off my Kingdom Hall, and now I'm having to drive, 30 miles down the road into the next town over. It's not really consistent with the message that God's waiting to bring the end and end all suffering for more people to join, when more people really aren't joining. At this point, it's like you almost feel like Watchtower is kind of hiding their numbers. I know people have said that in the past, and I've been someone like, yeah, I don't really know if they're going to be fudging their numbers. But I think I might have been the fool there, because I'm starting to be convinced that Watchtower is just kind of making things up now. I guess my mind's not made up. It probably never really is, but I'm kind of getting along like that wavelength of, yeah, maybe they are just making numbers up, because everything you hear from people that are active Jehovah's Witnesses is fairly consistent, with some rare exceptions in certain places in the world that it doesn't look great. Not looking good at my kingdom hall. Just some old people, and that's about it. So it's weird to use this specific of 120 years to make a point that doesn't really need to be made in the first place. So I just think like they're maybe trying to foment some excitement when it comes to 2034, a little bit like they did with 1975. Don't come out and say, oh no, what's happening in 2034, but maybe just hinting at little things, putting those little pieces of gum out there for people to chew on. And the last bit of business in this Watchtower that we'll look at here is this one, how to plan a wedding that brings honor to Jehovah. There were a few interesting little tidbits, but looking at how long this video is already going to be, we'll just kind of skip those and go right to this one where it says, reject unscriptural customs. Satan's system has contaminated wedding traditions with pagan, spiritistic, and superstitious practices. Jehovah clearly warns us to stay away from such unclean things. If there are some customs or traditions in your area that are questionable, consider their origin in any Bible principles that apply before deciding what to include in your wedding.
Likewise, mature Christians don't need a rule for every situation. Instead, we look at each situation and consider Bible principles. If no Bible law is directly involved, then we use our Bible-trained conscience to make a good decision. For example, consider the use of symbols or customs that may have roots in false religion. In our vast organization that spans 240 lands, can you imagine how many different symbols and customs our brothers encounter? How can we make good decisions about the use of a certain symbol or custom? Well, here are 3 basic principles to consider. Number 1, would Jehovah be offended by this? At 2 Corinthians 6:17, Jehovah gives us clear direction. Therefore, get out from among them and separate yourselves, says Jehovah, and quit touching the unclean thing, and I will take you in. This principle emphasizes that Christians must stay far away from any symbol or custom related to false religion or spiritism. Common examples today. What about covering your mouth when yawning? In ancient times, some people did so because they thought it would prevent one's soul from escaping. But what about today? Today, it is commonly viewed as a way of being polite and does not have a spiritistic meaning. What about wedding rings? Some historians claim wedding rings have pagan roots. Yet today, most people simply view wedding rings as a sign that the wearer is married. An example that illustrates the importance of timing is string lights. Many Bethelites here at Warwick enjoy putting white string lights on their balconies as decorations, except during November and December. Why not then? Because in this region of the world, string lights are closely associated with Christmas, a false religious holiday. So our Bethel family avoids even the appearance of participating in that false religious celebration. Another example is toasting or clinking glasses. For years, Jehovah's Witnesses have avoided this practice because it may have had origins in false religion. However, now, in most places, toasting or clinking glasses no longer has any religious association. It is viewed simply as a friendly custom.
So Stephen Letts says, hey guys, we don't get bogged down with looking at the origins of everything. It would consume all of your time. Everything has origins. And yet they're saying this. I think the most likely scenario is that this was written a while ago, right? And it's in there. It doesn't directly conflict with what he said, but it low-key kind of sort of conflicts with what he's saying there. And I think it was just like looked over like, hey, you know, this was already printed. It's fine. It's not a direct contradiction, so we'll leave it. But I think for a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses that took those words very seriously and were asking a lot of questions about, you know, what's going to be the follow-up. Something that I see a lot of on that JW Talk, that little version of Jehovah's Witness Reddit, is people bringing up that we need updates to the updates or clarifications of the clarifications. Because as soon as something is updated or clarified, there's like Pandora's box. You have 5 other questions that genuinely need to be asked and answered for it to all make sense. And none of those things were asked and answered. So this is only going to create more confusion. At the end of the day, this isn't going to help answer any of those questions. So Watchtower better be on it. They better get on the ball and really give people a very clear, concise understanding of what they mean by we don't care about pagan origins and practices, but sometimes we kind of do, because this is far too dubious to just leave out there for witnesses to interpret on their own. It's going to lead to a lot of people being offended, a lot of letters to circuit overseers, a lot of complaints, a lot of confusion. It's not going to be a good look, especially when they're always pushing this idea of unity and everyone basically being the same. They all worship the same. So anyway, that's about all I have to say for this month's Watchtower. Hope you enjoyed it. If you're still around, don't forget to drop a like on the video. Very much appreciated. I'll even give you a finger guns. And with all of that being said, stay safe. Be kind, and never forget that the fountain of... I forgot the outro. Yep, I just did that. You know what? You don't get an outro. Have a good ass day, because I forgot it. I'm a failure. Bye.